All right. Hi, everybody. Hey, welcome to our second episode. Super exciting of Summitly Sessions. This is Chris Kesler, your host. Today we've got Andrew Hill with FiveLumens joining me. Andrew and I go back a number of years, way back when, lots of different companies and past employers and everything. So excited to have him on to tell us a little bit about his company, his product, and what he's helping companies and call centers address. So thanks for joining today, Andrew.
Yeah, Chris, thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, excited to dive into this a little bit. You and I were talking over the past couple of months about your new project, and I wanted to bring you on so we could get into some specifics and share some of the exciting things that you're working on with some of my network and customers and everything. So maybe you could start by telling us, how long have you been working on FiveLumens? How'd you come up with the idea, and what are you trying to help businesses achieve with this exciting product you're working on?
Yeah, so actually, I've been in contact center operations for about 20 plus years now. And what I realized in managing different sizes, different verticals, but in regards to the company or industry, I realized that they had some same structural issues. You had the QA group that was building scorecards to score calls, not reflecting like the real call flow or even the optimal customer experience. You had training, which was well intentioned, but they were disconnected from what was actually going on in the day to day in the contact center. And then you had operations that was trying to translate all this into real time coaching and development. And so, as I looked at this about 6 years ago, I said the idea was to be able to take quality coaching and training, bringing it into one platform, so that way everybody was looking at the same reality, right? That it creates continuity. But over the past several years, as the AI push has happened, and Chat GPT comes out into the scene and just dramatically changes the entire landscape of everything. I realized that AI had the opportunity to be able to take this idea of continuity and everything in one place and actually fulfill something I've always wanted to do, and that is to make every conversation better. So, how does it use AI to be able to help great calls, more consistency, more accuracy, faster, right? How can we generate insights into what's going on, behavioral trends, globally and individually? How can we then take that into training and through AI role plays and training and coaching? And how can we keep on doing that loop over and over again so it becomes one continuous feedback loop that just really makes every conversation better?
Wow. Okay. That's pretty sweet. So, I mean, I think in my experience, if you were to go to any business as a call center and say, hey, we've got a tool, we're going to help make every conversation better. Like everyone wants to do that, I think. Are there different, as you work with your different clients and just based on your experience, I mean, what do you think that means to the businesses or to some of the clients? Is it different for everybody? Are they all looking to generally address some of the same metrics and challenges, or what have you seen with that?
Yeah, I think it really depends upon the business. Like when I met with a BPO about 3 years ago, and this was before we had started infusing AI into it, their biggest problem was that they had three different solutions that were managing these also. So they had a QA platform, they had a homegrown built coaching platform, they had an LMS, and they're like, it's just the cost is so much there. For them, it was like cost is great. These systems don't talk to each other. I have people logging in three different places. Can we just consolidate this into one platform, one cost, and everything and with everybody being able to see everything in the same place? And if we look at it nowadays with AI in there, you have the same type of thing that's happening. You have an AI simulation platform that you might be using for voice. Have an AI QA platform, and then you might have manual evaluations and you do for audits, for like system audits. And all these things reside in different platforms, right? So the idea was to say, okay, I have some clients that more focus on one part of the platform and some focus on other parts, and people like the entire thing. The great thing about FiveLumens, it's not like a traditional per seat model. It's a per usage model. So that way the people can pick and choose what they want to use based upon their situation.
Okay. Cool. No, I've seen the same situation that you described where they'll have all of these different systems that they have to manage for the different point solutions or functionality. So with your solution, you're saying a customer will have the ability to kind of do all that in one place. I mean, it makes sense because it's all related, it all correlates to each other. If you have measured and scored a certain agent's performance, and then you identify that, okay, they maybe are lacking with certain skills, so now they need to go and get brushed up on these through some coaching, and then they're going to be trained on this over time to up level their skills. So maybe walk people through just a high level, like what is that process like, both from an administrator's perspective as well as, if I'm an agent, like what is that experience like if I'm using your tool?
Yeah, from an admin perspective and agent perspective, they're vastly different, right? The admin has the ability to be able to create scorecards, unlimited amount of scorecards. When I think about a BPO, they have, 20, 50 lines of business. This is built, actually, it was built in mind with the BPO perspective, in that you can create multiple lines of businesses, multiple groups, and even for, for a single brand, it might be you have a retention department, or you have a sales department, you have a customer service department. It's built structurally to be able to handle these things. And so you can create scorecards for whichever one you're doing, whether it be for audits or for call scoring. It allows you to be able to create coaching forms, which are customizable to that. So you might have a coaching form that's designated for one-on-one coachings at the very beginning of the week versus a scorecard or an evaluation coaching. Right? It allows you from an admin perspective to be able to say, let me create an AI simulation role play. Let me take a great customer call that's out there, right? And let me upload that, use AI to be able to help drive the persona, make additional changes to the persona, and then administer role plays. And the same thing with an LMS. You can create your trainings like traditional LMS. And so the admin has the ability to be able to create all these different things. And the great thing about it from an admin perspective is that it's all interconnected. So if you have an evaluation that's created, you can go ahead and then assign a coaching form to it. So you ensure that the evaluation is viewed by the manager, that it's coached by the manager, and then once it's coached and it's gone over with the agent, that actually goes to the agent, right? Or if I need to assign a role player, that I can attach an evaluation to it, a coaching form to it. And so from the admin perspective, I can create what I want. I could decide who I want to assign it to. I can administer it. I can track it through the insights. And from an agent perspective, they have their own dashboard. So when they log in, they can see, okay, great, here are evaluations that have been completed on me. Here's the coaching session that was completed. Let me go back and review those notes. Because inside of coaching, one of the problems with coaching is the inability to be able to track and follow up most of the time. So we built that in there. So the agent knows what they need to do and when they need to do it. They can see it. The manager also sees that in their dashboard of when they got to follow up. But then the agent can go in there and can take role plays, trainings, do all of that, whether it be assigned to them or through a library where they can do it over and over again. And so the agent actually has a portal where they can go and participate, right? And see everything that's gone on. We don't try to hide everything. The idea is that if you're coaching and developing somebody, they need to see what it is. So that way they can review it and then participate in those trainings too at the same time.
Right. Yeah, no, that's cool. Now, how many, with your clients, how many calls for an average agent are you seeing that they're actually scoring and then coaching on and all of that? Because that's been a big shift also, as you know, with scoring of calls and everything. I mean, back in the day, pre-AI, it was like, hey, Andrew, you're an agent. We're going to score 2 calls a month of what you're handling. So with your tool and what you're seeing, how many calls are being scored against these scorecards?
Yeah, I think that's one of the great things about our platform is that as a usage model, you get to determine how many you get to evaluate. Right? If you look in the market right now, you see a whole bunch of these different products saying you can score 100% of these calls with AI. Realistically, it's very, very expensive. And to do something like that is really cost prohibitive. Right? And if you look at the law of large numbers, I have a client that does 300,000 sales calls a month. And they came to me and said, hey, you know what? We want to understand all of the objections that are going on. We want to create training around that. And they're like, we need to listen to every single call. And I'm like, you don't need to listen to it. I said, if you were to take out of that 300,000 calls and evaluate 1,800 of them, seems like a lot, but it's very small compared to that. I said, you're going to get about 95% accuracy, maybe a 3% margin of error. For what you're looking for, that's exactly what you want. It's going to tell you what all the main drivers are for objections. But the important thing is that they actually don't evaluate just non-sales calls, they evaluate sales calls too. So now what they can do is they can look at objections that they overcome and get conversions and which ones they don't overcome. And then they can design that training. So the idea is to say, well, let's continue on with doing what we're doing that is working, and let's focus on what's not working. And so for them, they said, hey, we want to do that. I have a BPO client that says, you know what, they have a client that comes to them and says, you know what, we want a 600 call audit done this week. That's where you just, all this labor is going to it, and they're just attacking 600 audit calls. And so for them, the beauty of it is that they can say, okay, I can take a half day, create some prompts, create a scorecard through our prompt engineer that we have on site. They create their scorecard, they validate it through maybe 20, 30 calls, and they say, great, let's now upload 500 calls. We'll get this audit done in less than a day. And they don't have to worry about that fluctuation with that labor, right? Or another client has, like a sales client need to be able to do role plays. So they say, you know what, we want to give unlimited role plays to our agents, and the agent determines how many times they want to take those role plays over and over again. So Chris, the idea that the old idea of, you need to listen to one call per week or 2 a month, it's getting thrown out the window. It's like, let's figure out what is the right amount for our business. Let's evaluate that, make sure we get the right data for us, because you want to coach to behavioral trends, whether it be on a global level for coaching and training or an individual level. You're not going to do that with one call per week, right? It's the luck of the draw. So really, I see our clients going from, maybe 4 per agent per week up to a larger quantities based upon what they're trying to achieve at that point.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the statistics class I took up at the U. To your point, like it gets to a certain number where, okay, you don't need to keep sampling because you've met that threshold. So it's kind of that happy medium. Do you help your clients then figure out how many they need to be looking at so that it's statistically valid and it's a good sample size? Because to your point, there are a lot of vendors that are like, hey, we're going to do 100%, but it's like, well, okay, but at what point does that, you're wasting cost, it's overkill. So you'll come in and you'll look at the scenario and you'll say, okay, to meet your needs, here's how many you should be scoring on a regular basis.
Yeah, and one of the things that is as different in our platform versus others is that most platforms look to be able to score a call. Yes, no. Did they do it? Did they not do it? Right? That goes into a score that the agent sees, and maybe have auto fails, which we have all of that, right? Just like everybody else, like the traditional scorecard. But we also have what's called metadata. So what we do is we have another part of the scorecard the agent never sees, but allows the company to be able to gather information, right? And so we have a client that uses it for cancellation calls, right? They have a cancellation line, people calling, they want to cancel their contract. And what they want to do is they want to make sure that they're grading the agent based upon their following the process, doing everything possible to try to save the account. But with them, we actually use our metadata section of the scorecard that says, okay, here, what are the top objections? What are the top 3 objections this person gave for cancellation, right? And we gather that data for them. So quality is turning into not just a scoring mechanism, but for us, it's about how can you get more context and intent out of that call, that conversation, to be able to do different things. So they actually use those cancellation reasons to be able to send them back to product teams, to marketing, to understand what are the reasons why they're canceling. And at the same time, they're understanding if their agents are doing it right or not. So quality is changing in the respect is it's got to go away from score and to basically be context and intent of the call.
Yeah, that makes sense. So do you have to know, I would assume you do, but like for that example, would you just go into the metadata and search like, why are customers canceling? Or how do you get to that level of detail where, okay, hey, here's all the metadata that's coming back, so then we can determine what those reasons are?
Yeah, that's a great question. And really it is not that the only data you have is the data you tell AI to have, right? And so when you create a traditional scorecard, you'll say, did this agent give the correct opening? Did they overcome the objection? Were they persistent, active listening, etc., right? So that scorecard is built normally. In the same scorecard, we have a section called metadata, and that's where you say, okay, I need to create 10 fields. I want to gather these 10 pieces of information. So you tell the AI, in this field, I want you to be able to listen to the call. I want you to be able to, regardless of whether it's a sale or not, or we save it or not, I want you to list in an array all of the reasons for cancellation. Okay. Number 2, I want this data right here. And so when our clients go to be able to pull data either via API or through exports. The fields of those metadata are included in the scorecard, even though the agent doesn't see it. So now what they can
Hmm.
do is they can take all that data and say, okay, great, let's look at all of this and understand what are the highest, what are the biggest reasons that people are canceling. Let's say, is there anything we can do from it? Do we need to create training for in the contact center? Do we need to go to product because this is what's happening? Do we need to go to pricing because it's too big of a jump and everybody's canceling for it and it's ruining your save rate? And so they can view that information that way, but you have to tell the AI what you want it to capture. And when you do, it's going to do a good job of capturing it.
Okay, that makes sense. But no, that's still great because I think, to your point, every call center has a different objective. And so they can go in and say, hey, for these types of calls, we want to capture these metrics that are important based on the call types. No, that's great. So, as you and I have talked before, one of the things I'd like to get into is kind of specific business impact ROI case study type information. I want people who listen to this to be able to easily correlate like, hey, I have this business situation, here's how we're doing it, and if I look at a solution like FiveLumens, here's the kind of impact that we could have if we used a solution like that. At the beginning we talked about how one of the benefits or objectives of the platform is to help improve every customer call. So using that, and as you've deployed it, what are some of before we get into the actual case study, what are some of the actual ROI metrics or dials that you're seeing businesses actually turn and get, are they looking to save money? Are they driving more revenue? Are they improving customer experience? Those are some of the main things that businesses usually want to do. So, when you say, hey, we're going to help you improve every customer call, eventually it's going to get to a CFO or a CEO that says, well, hey, that's great, but how does that help the business? So what are you seeing and how do you kind of see that with your solution playing out?
Yeah, I think the what we have seen is it's about what is the outcome you're trying to achieve, right? From a big company though, they obviously the CFO is looking at revenue, they're looking at cost savings, whatever that might be, and then that trickles down. So when we look at our clients are looking at metrics like conversion rate, right? They're looking at what might be a revenue per call. In the instance of maybe people trying to upsell. We're looking at customer satisfaction and NPS. From our perspective, a lot of people in the marketplace feel like some of these things are outdated. But we understand they're important to the business. And so we actually create standard metrics inside of every evaluation that looks at agent sentiment, customer sentiment, projected CSAT, and projected NPS, and gives you the reasoning behind those. So rather than waiting for later on for one of those metrics, you can use that to be able to say, oh, here's a trend we're seeing. Let's fix it before it actually becomes a bad NPS or a bad CSAT. People like to look at first contact resolution, right? So how do you use that to be able to identify those triggers that are having people call back? Average handling time, obviously, is one there. You got quality scores and consistency across evaluations that they're looking for, right? A big one is time to proficiency for new hires, right? Along with that, agent attrition and retention. One thing from a manager standpoint is coaching completion and effectiveness. Are they completing the coachings when they're supposed to? And if the agent behavior is never changing, then it's one of two reasons, right? It's an agent issue or it's a manager issue, or it could be a combination of both, right? But that helps you to understand if this manager has everybody, they're doing coachings over and over and over again, but not a single agent is developing, there's something wrong with their coaching effectiveness, right? And then you also look at training effectiveness and post-training behavior change. If you go out to the floor and you say, I had a client who was in the hospitality industry, and they were very concerned about misrepresenting themselves as the hotel. They had their own brands, but they wanted to make sure they never misrepresented it. So as they would do a training on these type of things, you could put the QA score out, the QA evaluation out there, do an audit of 300-400 calls, and immediately see if that training is being effective or not.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's, pretty powerful if you can go to all of these different clients, different use cases. I mean, all of these metrics, obviously, to your point, are correlated with better training, better coaching, better analysis of how your agents are performing. So, there's not a lot of solutions that are so varied as far as the potential impact, that they can have on a particular business. So that's really exciting because, I know all my clients, they're all different businesses, different industries. They're trying to address different challenges, but knowing that, well, hey, if we, level up your agents and, reduce turnover and reduce the amount of time, like you said, to proficiency and onboarding and attrition, I mean, that benefits every call center regardless of what they're doing or size or anything. So that's pretty exciting. Well, why don't we dig into one specific example if you have one that we could, break down as a case study so that people can understand maybe the before and the after of what it looks like when your solution's being deployed. So maybe tell us a little bit about who this client is. You don't have to share their name if you don't want to, but what was their situation before? What were they looking to address? And then by using your solution, what was the impact?
Yeah, there's several good examples I have that I was going to share today, and looking at one in particular. And the reason why I had multiple examples to share today is that each one uses the platform in a different way. And we talked about a hospitality client that we had, and we talked about how they had 300,000 calls per month, and they had two very specific, I guess, three things that they're really worrying about. Right? Is they're worried about compliance, and they're very worried about one, representing their brand correctly. And then when people, and that goes along with that, and that's just not about mentioning your name and saying, hey, we're this one, we're independent, this or that. But it's like when people ask certain questions, right, that might allude to the fact that they think there that representation there. How would a person respond? So we've worked with them to be able to create a compliance section in the scorecard for them specifically that addresses all those concerns they have about things that will get them in trouble when it comes to compliance. And I know that's not the sexiest thing that's out there, right? But for them, that's a big deal because that's very concerning for them. And so what they do is they now have the ability every single time to be able to accurately look at all calls and determine if those happen. Now, what we've seen when we started implementing these scorecards is that...
And maybe real quick, Andrew, so when they came to you and when you started talking to them, what was their life or their paradigm like before? So what were they doing to try to address this issue of compliance and branding and everything before they even talked to you? What were they using and what was the process like?
Yeah, their process before was all manual, right? It's and it might be fragmented where some of the clients as a BP, as they use multiple BPOs, maybe some of their BPOs are doing it one way versus another. So the idea of having this fragmented grading, along with having to hire your own manual people to be able to do that, created this thing where it's like you got somebody representing your brand that might be doing it one way. You also have this issue of having to manually do it, taking longer time frame, and with that manual comes that inconsistency, right? And especially when it comes to dealing with different accents and thickness of accents on the phone, that sometimes can get to be a problem.
Okay, so they had multiple partners, BPO partners that were supporting all of these calls, each of whom were potentially doing it different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And they felt like, hey, this is a big enough issue. We need to have a standard process, a more effective process to do this across all of our partners.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily, standard is, they do have their standards, but it is to be able to say, let's make sure that everybody's adhering to these standards, right? And let's make sure that we can do it more accurately, more consistently, from that perspective there.
Was there a cost benefit to them doing it that way as well? If they were doing it manually, were they paying, a bunch of people? Because that's what I've seen with a lot of clients as far as the scorecard classic QA processes. For 100 agents, you might have, I don't know, you probably know too, like 8 to 10 people on the quality team who are all just manually going through those calls. So was there a cost savings by moving it to a platform that you saw?
Yeah, I do see a cost savings when it comes to our platform, especially since it's usage based, right?
Right.
It's like you complete an evaluation, you get charged for the evaluation, right? And so there is that benefit from a cost perspective. I think a lot of it also is not necessarily just cost. A lot of it is your speed to be able to evaluate, your consistency factor with that. There's always that cost savings factor in it, which could be greater or smaller depending upon where your QA team resides, right? If your QA team's inside the US, your savings are going to be a lot more by using an auto QA product, right? But if your quality team is in the Philippines, you're still going to have that cost benefit, but it's going to be less than if we're US based.
Yeah, that
And so
makes
it really
sense.
depends. So that cost savings depends upon, where they're located at. But I think it's that ability to be able to get that consistency and accuracy. And one of the things that usually happens too with them is that let's say you have to listen to 300 calls. You might take you a week to do that. By the time you get done with that week, you're already a week to 2 weeks beyond when that interaction happened. There's never going to be any recollection of that interaction, and it's now past. By the time you start then coaching to that behavior, the calls you're going to be pulling for the next round have already been completed, right? So that speed actually allows you to be able to attack the behavior in more real time versus maybe waiting a couple weeks before you're ever gonna talk to it.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I threw you off on the case study with the hospitality client asking about the cost savings, but you kind of dove into that a little bit. So you were talking about, being able to standardize and make sure that everyone's implementing some of those changes. What else, if there's anything else that you would have shared as far as kind of the ROI that customer experienced?
Yeah, I think there's a hidden ROI. I don't know how to quantify this, but there's always been this animosity, if I can put it for that word, between QA and operations, right? QA is there to be able to find all the bad. You're never going to get any good. And the operations is saying, why are you always pointing out the bad versus tell me where I did good, right? And so you have this, I guess, dichotomy that's happening here inside of these call centers. And what this really does, and then if somebody makes a mistake, then it's like, well, I don't trust them, right? One of the great things that happens with the tool is that you get a singular tool that grades it, right? That consistent approach every single time to the same call. Now, what we've seen is that if you put crap into AI, you're going to get crap out, right? If you put standards that are not the standards you're really looking for, you're going to get the outcomes that are not really the ones that you're looking for out of it. And so as I worked with this client, we had to go several rounds of really understanding the standards around what they're grading and had to get them more defined and more clear because the AI needs clearness to be able to grade. And so that's another thing that's there is that it helps you really dive into what are the exceptions? Why are you doing this? What does it really mean to be able to do this? When should I not double ding somebody? And it gives clarity to what you think that customer experience should be. And now your grading is based upon that clarity versus maybe 8 people's different idea of what that really means.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes sense. So was there anything on this hospitality client, anything else that you feel like they really got from a business impact that you want to dive into? I don't know if you had other ones that you want to dive into, but any other, like, if you were to ask them, like, oh my gosh, it impacted our business in these ways as well. Anything else that you would share with that?
I think those ways are are the main ways in which they would say this is what was how it really affected us and why we used the platform. If I think about the different parts of the platform that we have our AI QA, which we just talked about with one client, right? We have a coaching, and we actually had a client that didn't use our platform to begin with because of AI. They used it because of coaching. They had no idea who was coaching what. They had no way to track that it was being done. And they used our coaching platform to be able to say, okay, we can now go ahead and make sure that every coaching is being administered. We can see what they're doing. And so really that platform, the client sometimes focuses on a singular part or multiple parts. And when I look at a BPO that we use, we have a BPO that uses it from the AI QA perspective. They use it from the coaching perspective. And now that we have AI role plays, they're going to start working on that part of it with them, right? They have a group of salespeople that are dialing outbound for contract renewals. And the problem with that is your outbound dialing, as you know, over many years, outbound contact rate is not great. And so what happens is when you're dialing outbound, you have this long gap between calls. And it does 2 things. One is it gets it so I'm cold, and then I actually get surprised when somebody answers the call, right? The role plays are used in between calls. So an agent can go into the platform and use those anytime they want in between calls. And what it does is it gives them a chance to be able to practice against real life scenarios. And then what it also does is it keeps them fresh. So that way when that call comes in, they're not surprised. It's like they've been talking to clients all day. And they can pick and choose which ones they want to do and how often they want to do them to keep themselves fresh and ready for the next call that really comes through. So there's lots of different ways in which they do it. We had that same client, they used AI role plays for new hires. And what we realized is the new hires that used AI role plays versus traditional role plays actually became, they actually exceeded all metrics within the first 6 weeks of all measured metrics compared to the non-AI classes. So the AI has this great benefit that we see. We initially created to be able to put everything in one place, right? One source truth, everything right there. Now with AI, it makes it so it's this entire training platform where you go from identifying gaps to grading, identifying, to getting insights, to coaching and developing, to really empowering the agent through these trainings, through role plays and training that they can do. And then we loop that back through a follow-up and a commitment pattern that allows them to be able to continue this loop over and over and over again. And so incrementally what it does is it starts to improve conversations, maybe not dramatically, but if you can incrementally improve each interaction, at the end of the day, it's going to become so much greater that incremental improvement just compounds over time.
Sure. Yeah. I'm thinking about kind of the example you gave of them decreasing the amount of time that was required to get them to be proficient. Do you remember what that was like when they were not using your tool? So if they got up to speed within 6 weeks, exceeding all the metrics with your tool, do you remember what it was before or what they were comparing that against?
Yeah, they ran two classes side by side, right?
Yeah.
And one of those was non-AI, one was AI. And in the first 6 weeks, they outperformed them in every single metric and achieved their goals within the first 6 weeks, most of them after a couple weeks, right? Whereas the other group, even after 8 weeks, wasn't there, right? So you can see that time proficiency gap was pretty great. And what's interesting about that is you go from a contact center perspective, whether I worked in the hospitality industry or the BPO, you sometimes get large fluctuations in employees, right? And you can use this platform from an evaluation perspective, coaching and training for new hires and say, okay, great, here is your learning module, it includes these 4 role plays, includes this LMS, you got to go through 3 calls. And when you pass all of that, that's when you get to hit the floor, right? Or you can just use it out on the floor at any time to be able to say, we want to make these people more proficient, and they can do it at their own speed. So it really is a platform that's really adjust based upon your needs.
Yeah. Well, I remember early on when I was getting into the call center space, realizing and hearing how expensive it was to hire a new agent, put them through training, all that lost productivity time. If you think of, well, okay, I've hired Andrew, but he's brand new, and it's going to take me 8 weeks of just training him and getting him to the point where he can even handle a call, which is just a sunk cost of, it's going to cost me what, 8 grand of hourly wage for Andrew, where he's not doing anything of value basically for me. And so if you take that from 8 weeks to 4 weeks, for example, well, okay, hey, you just saved me 4 grand per agent potentially. And then on the other side, like you said, long term, if I'm going to bring the average level of productivity and proficiency up as a group, well, great. Now again, I'm not wasting money. I'm getting more, upsell, cross sell. I'm, whatever it is, but that can be pretty powerful, especially like you're saying, if it's a BPO or a larger call center of scale, those metrics compound very, very quickly.
Yeah, another important thing is you think about attrition in a contact center,
Yeah.
right? And if you look at from like sales perspective or customer high tech, customer support, people are nervous to get on the phones anyways. I remember my first contact center sales job, and I was working for a financial services company, a credit card company. And I remember getting on there the first time. I'd been taught the sales process. I knew what I was doing. I knew why I was doing it, but I had no at bats. And the only thing I did, they said, was get on the phones, right? And I'm one to work hard to figure out how to make it work, and I eventually did, and became a great salesperson doing that. But a lot of people aren't like that. They get to the point where they try to do something and they see instant failure, and it kind of turns them off, right? It's just like this downward spiral. I'm failing, so I'm gonna try harder. I'm not getting it. I'm getting discouraged. Like it goes this downward spiral. And what this platform allows you to do is to say, you know what? Let's give you the opportunity to be able to practice and train with real life scenarios or understand training before you ever hit that call. And that allows an agent to be able to feel like they get on the phones and they see some success. That gives them that little extra, oomph or whatever to be able to continue going and to become better. And so it not only helps with that time of proficiency, but that also reduces that attrition, right? You're saying you got to replace somebody. That's a huge metric of not just they're not working and I got to wait 8 weeks or 12 weeks to understand if they're not working or not. Well, you can shorten that time frame, but also that voluntary attrition for good people, you hired them to begin with.
Yeah.
You want to try to reduce that attrition from the people you feel like are going to succeed.
Yep. No, totally. Yeah, that can be really painful. I know a lot of call centers who have, in the past they were just losing hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars if they're a big call center on just attrition and that constant cycle of hiring and training and onboarding and then having people leave and just it like never ended. So I think there's some massive benefit there. I think this has been great. I mean, again, the notes that I wrote down and some of the things that you shared, going to any call center and saying, hey, we've got a platform that can help improve your conversion rate, that can reduce attrition, that can reduce the time that it takes to get your agents to become proficient, improve average handle time, first call resolution, all of these things. I mean, those are all really, really powerful metrics. So I think this is going to be great for everyone who's listening, anybody that has a call center. As you and I have talked, you're doing some exciting things for, new customers where, they can kind of do some proof of concepts and things, and that's probably not going to be around forever. But, anything you want to end on as somebody that might be interested in your platform that you want to share as far as, FiveLumens and what you're trying to do for businesses out there.
Yeah, what we're trying to do is we're trying to be able to show the value of the platform and what we do to all of our clients, right? So like you're saying, a proof of concept. What we do is we meet with our clients, we do an initial meeting where we kind of understand what's going on. We ask a lot of questions to make sure that this is going to be the right fit for them. If so, then we have another meeting where we go ahead and let's go through all of your standards. We create for them their first AI scorecard free of charge. And what we do is we run calls through it. So we might run 100, 200 calls through that to be able to show them the benefit of using the entire platform. And once that's validated and what it is, then we'll talk about how do we go forward in a long-term relationship. But it's an easy way for us to be able to take a week to 2 weeks to create your scorecard for you, to validate the accuracy, to have you run 100, 200 calls through it, see how it's going, for you to be able to say, okay, great, this is something I really like, and it's going to work for us. All right, let's figure out what the long-term plan for you is. So right now, that's the way we like doing it. And what that gives us is an opportunity to be able to, instead of all these tools that are supposedly plug and play, you don't need any help. I don't think that's really what is meant to happen, right? Our thing is to say, let's understand how you're using operation-wise, and let me show you how you can abuse the system to your benefit, right? Let's see how we can really use all the tools for it to really make every interaction better. And we focus on those tools and technology that are actually actionable tools that will actually make change.
Mm-hmm. No, I think, in the last episode that we had, one of the discussion points that we had was that there are a lot of AI tools, AI-centric tools out there, and there's a lot that kind of struggle to connect the dots between what they're going to do and how it's going to improve the business. I think with your platform and solutions like FiveLumens, there's a very clear correlation. If you can address any of those metrics that we just talked about and improve them, then there's obvious clear ROI for the business. So this is exciting. I appreciate you coming on and diving into this for my listeners and my network a little bit today. I'd love to see more companies and call centers using a tool like FiveLumens, and hopefully you can continue to grow and have success. I'm excited to see what you guys do with this. So thanks again, Andrew.
Thanks a lot, Chris, for having us on. It's been a pleasure.
All right, man. Have a good day. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Okay.